The first thing Daniel Whitmore heard after waiting outside the delivery room for nearly an hour was not the cry of his newborn child. It was the nurse's quiet voice. "Mr. Whitmore, congratulations. You have a beautiful baby girl." Daniel's smile disappeared. "A girl?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, your wife and daughter are both healthy." Daniel looked through the small glass window. Inside, Eleanor was exhausted but smiling. She held the tiny baby against her chest as though she were holding the most precious thing in the world. When she saw Daniel, her face brightened. "Daniel," she whispered, "come meet your daughter." But Daniel didn't move. For years he had dreamed of having a son, a boy who would carry the Whitmore name, a boy who would inherit his company, a boy who would sit beside him one day and continue the empire he had built. He had convinced himself that this was the only kind of legacy that mattered, and now, standing outside that room, he felt cheated. 3 days later, Elena was sitting in their mansion when Daniel walked into the room. She was holding their newborn daughter. "What happened?" she asked. Daniel placed a folder on the table. "I've arranged a house for you." Elena stared at him. "What? You and the baby will live there." She slowly stood. "Why?" Daniel looked at the baby instead of his wife. "Because I can't continue this marriage." Elena's face went pale. "You're leaving us?" "I am not abandoning you. You're sending us away." Daniel remained silent. Elena stepped closer. "She is your daughter." "I know." "Then why are you doing this?" Daniel finally said the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I wanted a son." Elena stared at him in disbelief. "You think I chose her?" Daniel looked away. "You don't understand what the Whitmore name means." "No," Eleanor replied quietly. "I understand exactly what it means." She looked down at her baby. "It means a man can love a name more than his own child." Daniel's expression hardened. "Enough." "No." Elena's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "One day, Daniel, you will understand what you threw away." He walked out. That night, Elena left the mansion with her newborn daughter. Her name was Clara. Daniel never held her. 4 years later, Elena gave birth to another daughter, Sophie. Daniel didn't even come to the hospital. Instead, he sent a message. "You and the children are no longer part of the Whitmore family." Elena read it once, then she deleted it. She looked at her 2 little girls sleeping beside her. "You don't need his name," she whispered. "You need love." And for the next 17 years, Elena gave them everything she had. She worked, she struggled, she sacrificed. But she never taught her daughters to hate their father. Whenever Clara asked why he had left, Elena gave the same answer. Because he made a terrible mistake. What mistake? He thought having sons would make him a better father. Clara never understood. Not yet. Meanwhile, Daniel built the life he thought he wanted. And eventually, he got his sons. 5 years after abandoning Elena, Daniel married again. His new wife Victoria came from a wealthy family. A year later, they welcomed a son, Ethan. 2 years after that, another boy was born, Ryan. Daniel was overjoyed. He announced the birth to the newspapers. The Whitmore legacy continues. He bought Ethan a silver crib. He filled Ryan's nursery with expensive toys. And when the boys grew older, Daniel gave them everything money could buy: private schools, luxury vacations, sports cars when they became old enough to drive. Nothing was too expensive. Nothing was too much. Daniel believed he was preparing his sons to inherit his empire. But there was one thing he forgot to give them: discipline. Ethan learned that his father's name could protect him from consequences. If he argued with a teacher, Daniel called the school. If he damaged something, Daniel paid for it. If he got into trouble, lawyers appeared before Daniel even asked questions. Ryan watched his older brother carefully. He learnt the same lesson. Money was power. The family name was protection. And consequences were for ordinary people. By the time Ethan was 17 and Ryan was 15, both boys had become arrogant and reckless. Daniel saw their confidence. He called it strength. He saw their selfishness. He called it ambition. He saw their disrespect. He called it independence. One evening, Daniel hosted a grand dinner for several business partners. He raised his glass. "To my sons," he said proudly. "To the future of Whitmore Holdings." Everyone applauded. Ethan smiled. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Daniel looked at them with pride. He had finally created the family he believed he deserved. But that same night, Ethan secretly took money from one of his father's accounts. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Over the next 2 years, the amount grew. First thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. Ethan used the money for expensive cars, parties, private investments, and foolish business deals. Ryan eventually joined him. They created accounts Daniel knew nothing about. And whenever someone questioned them, they said the same thing. Our father will handle it. They had learned that lesson from Daniel himself. One morning, Daniel's financial director quietly entered his office. Sir, I need to discuss something. Daniel looked up. What? There are unusual withdrawals from several company accounts. How much? The man hesitated. Almost $38 million. Daniel stood. What? We traced some of the transactions. And the director placed documents on the desk. Your son's names are connected to several of them. Daniel refused to believe it. My sons? Yes. Daniel's face hardened. I'll speak to them. He didn't know that before he could confront them, another name would appear in his life. A name he had buried 17 years earlier. Clara. Daniel's company was searching for a young business analyst to assist with a major expansion project. One afternoon, a young woman entered his boardroom. She was confident, intelligent, and calm. Her name was Clara Bennett. Daniel barely looked at her resume. Then she began speaking. Her analysis of the company's expansion plan was better than the work of several senior executives. Daniel was impressed. Where did you learn all this? My mother taught me to work hard. Daniel looked at her. Your mother? Yes. What is her name? Clara smiled. Elena Bennett. Daniel froze. For several seconds he couldn't speak. The room seemed to become silent. Bennett? Yes. Daniel stared at her face. Suddenly he noticed her eyes. They were Elena's eyes. The same expression. The same slight tilt of her head. The same way she paused before answering. Daniel's heart began pounding. After the meeting, he secretly ordered his assistant to investigate. The report arrived that evening. Clara Bennett, age 17. Mother, Elena Bennett. Daniel read the page again, then again. There was no doubt. Clara was his daughter. The daughter he had refused to hold. The daughter he had sent away. The daughter who had grown up without him. Daniel sat alone in his office until midnight. For the first time in 17 years, he opened an old photograph of Elena. He whispered, I was wrong. The next morning, Clara found him waiting outside the office. I know you found out, she said. Daniel nodded. I should have told you. No, Clara replied. You should have known. Daniel lowered his eyes. I want to make things right. Clara looked at him. You can't. I can try. She shook her head. You can give me money. I don't want to. You can give me your last name. I would. But neither one gives me 17 years. Daniel had no answer. Then Clara said something that broke him. My mother never taught us to hate you. Daniel looked up. She should have. No. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She said you made a terrible mistake. Daniel's voice trembled. She was right. Clara walked away. But the truth didn't stop there. Daniel soon learned that Clara had a younger sister, Sophie, his second daughter, and she had grown into an ambitious young woman studying medicine. 2 daughters, both successful, both raised without him. Daniel suddenly remembered Elena's words. One day, you will understand what you threw away. For the first time, he did. But just as he began thinking about his daughters, his sons created a crisis that would force the entire family together. The scandal began on a Friday night. Ethan and Ryan attended a private party with several wealthy friends. An argument broke out. Ethan used the Whitmore name to threaten another young man. Ryan joined him. Someone recorded the incident. By morning, the video was everywhere. The headlines spread across social media. Billionaires' sons accused of threats and financial misconduct. Daniel's company lost millions in market value within hours. Business partners demanded explanations. The board demanded Ethan and Ryan be removed from all company affairs. Daniel called his sons into his office. Ethan walked in first. You said you'd fix it. Daniel stared at him. I've spent 17 years protecting you. Ethan shrugged. And you still don't understand what you've done. Ryan entered behind him. Dad, you're overreacting. Daniel slammed the newspaper onto the desk. Overreacting? He pointed at the headline. You stole company money. Ethan's face changed. You said the company would be ours. It will be. Then what's the difference? Daniel stared at him. The difference is that you didn't earn it. Ethan laughed. You never taught us to earn anything. Daniel became silent. The words struck him because they were true. He had spent years blaming Elena for giving him daughters, but he had never questioned what kind of father he was becoming to his sons. He had given them money instead of values, power instead of responsibility, protection instead of consequences, and now they were destroying the legacy he had sacrificed everything to create. Then the financial director entered. Mr. Whitmore, we found the remaining transfers. Daniel turned. Where did the money go? The director placed another document on the desk. Your sons invested in a private company. Which company? The director looked uncomfortable. A shell company registered under another name. Daniel opened the file. Then he froze. The company had been trying to secretly acquire shares in Whitmore Holdings. His sons hadn't merely stolen the money, they had been planning to gain control of part of their father's empire. Daniel looked at Ethan. Did you do this? Ethan said nothing. Ryan finally spoke. We wanted what was going to be ours anyway. Daniel stared at both boys. Then he understood. He had spent his entire life building a legacy for children who never respected it. That evening, Daniel drove to Elena's home. He stood outside for several minutes before knocking. Elena opened the door. You came back. Daniel nodded. I need your help, she looked surprised. My sons have destroyed the company. Elena sighed. And what do you want me to do? I don't know. She looked at him. For once, Daniel wasn't the powerful billionaire standing before her. He was simply an old man who had finally run out of answers. You wanted sons, Elena said quietly. Daniel looked down. I know. You got them. I know. And now? Daniel's voice broke. Now I understand that I should have wanted children who were good people. Elena said nothing. Then Daniel added, I lost my daughters because I was ashamed of them. Elena's eyes softened slightly. And now you're ashamed of your sons? Daniel shook his head. No. He looked toward the street. I'm ashamed of myself. Daniel didn't ask Elena to forgive him. He didn't ask Clara and Sophie to call him father. He knew he hadn't earned those things. Instead, he made a decision. He publicly accepted responsibility for his son's actions. He removed Ethan and Ryan from all company positions. He repaid the money taken from the company. He cooperated with the investigation. And for the first time in his life, Daniel stopped using his wealth to protect his family from consequences. Ethan was furious. You're destroying us. Daniel looked at him sadly. No, I gave you everything. And that's where I failed. Ryan stared at him. You're choosing strangers over us. Daniel shook his head. They are not strangers. He paused. They are my daughters. For the first time, Ethan realized there were two people who had been missing from his father's life. Two people he had never heard him talk about. Two daughters. Daniel's daughters. Meanwhile, Clara and Sophie were trying to decide whether to meet their father. Sophie was more hesitant. What if he disappoints us again? Clara looked at her. Then we walk away. Their mother listened quietly. Finally, Elena said, You don't owe him forgiveness. Clara nodded. But maybe I want to know who he really is. That evening, the four of them sat together at a small restaurant. No cameras, no business partners, no mansion. Just four people sitting around one table. Daniel looked at his daughters. Clara. Sophie. For 17 years he had imagined what his sons would become. But he had never once imagined this moment. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Sophie replied, Then don't say anything. Daniel nodded. So they ate, slowly, quietly. It wasn't a magical reunion. There were no instant hugs, no sudden forgiveness. Just a beginning. After dinner, Clara asked, Why did you do it? Daniel knew exactly what she meant. Why did you leave us? He looked at the table. Because I was foolish. That isn't enough. I know. He took a breath. I believed having a son would prove that I had built a successful family. Sophie asked, And now? Daniel looked at both daughters. Now I know success isn't measured by the name someone carries. His voice trembled. It's measured by the person they become. Clara remained silent. Then she said, "You can't change the past." "I know, but you can change what happens next." Daniel looked at her. "Is that a chance?" Clara didn't smile. "It's a possibility." For Daniel, that was enough. A year later, Whitmore Holdings was no longer the same company. Daniel had stepped down as CEO. He created a foundation supporting young students who came from difficult circumstances. He didn't name it after himself, he named it after his two daughters, the Elena Bennett Foundation. When reporters asked why, Daniel simply said, "Because there was a woman who raised two extraordinary daughters after I failed them." Elena never publicly praised him, but she eventually agreed to sit on the foundation's board. Clara became involved in the business side. Sophie continued her medical studies. They didn't suddenly become a perfect family. There were still difficult conversations. There were still old wounds. But there was something that had never existed before. A relationship. Daniel also changed the way he treated Ethan and Ryan. He didn't abandon them. He didn't hate them. But he stopped protecting them from consequences. Ethan eventually admitted what he had done. Ryan followed. It took time, but both boys began rebuilding their lives without depending on their father's money. One evening, Daniel sat alone in his old mansion. The family portraits were still on the wall. His grandfather. His father. Himself. But something had changed. Daniel took the old portrait down. He replaced it with a new photograph. It showed Elena, Clara, Sophie, Ethan, Ryan, and Daniel. Not because the family was perfect, but because they had finally learned the truth. Family was never about sons carrying a name. It was never about daughters being unwanted. It was never about money, power, or inheritance. It was about the people who stayed when life became difficult. Daniel looked at the photograph for a long time. Then his phone rang. It was Clara. "Dad?" Daniel froze. She had never called him that before. He smiled quietly. "Yes, I wanted to ask if you were coming to Sophie's graduation." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I wouldn't miss it." After the call ended, Daniel walked toward the window. 17 years earlier, he had believed daughters were the end of his legacy. Now he understood they had been the greatest part of it. He had once banished his wife because she gave him daughters. Years later, his sons had brought him shame. But his daughters, they brought him something money could never buy, a second chance. And Daniel finally understood the lesson he had spent half his life learning. A child does not carry a family's honour because of their gender.